Here are 11 insane facts about living in Atlanta, Georgia. The first one is the enormous Confederate memorial on the face of Stone Mountain. I cannot believe that we have continued to allow this huge memorial that stands for such a negative time in our history to remain on the Stone Mountain. Stone Mountain Park is visited by millions of people every year here in Metro Atlanta, and the Confederate Memorial is over 3 acres in size and was created in 1915, I believe, and is certainly a big source of controversy for many people here in Metro Atlanta. And the fact that this has continued to be allowed to remain on Stone Mountain is super surprising. I think one of the difficulties with this is how difficult it would be to remove it. And the fact that so many people continue to visit Stone Mountain Park every year is so surprising, but certainly it is a scar on the history of Metro Atlanta. This next insane fact has to do with Snowmageddon 2014. This was an event that caused one of the longest traffic jams in Atlanta history, and it happened in the wintertime in 2014 when the temperature in the day was about 35 degrees or so, and it was raining in the afternoon. And by the time rush hour hit that day, the temperature had fallen below freezing. So all of that rain that had fallen on the roads and on the interstate systems where we regularly see rush hour traffic had frozen, creating like a sheet of ice on all of the roads in Metro Atlanta. This created a traffic jam that has become infamous across the country. And so many of my family were even stuck in that traffic jam that lasted 3 days for many people. There were cars littering the roads for weeks because of this traffic jam, this snowmageddon. And so it was certainly surprising to see just how terribly the city of Atlanta handled this issue with the rain and the freezing rain on that day in 2014. This next insane fact about living in Atlanta is that there are over 70 roads in Metro Atlanta with the name Peachtree in them, which causes a ton of confusion for so many people, especially because one of the main roads that runs right down the middle of Atlanta is Peachtree Street. There really is only one Peachtree Street, but there are so many roads like Peachtree Industrial Boulevard or Peachtree Road or Peachtree Street Southwest. So there are so many roads all around the city with this word in it, which causes lots of confusion among many people who live here in Metro Atlanta and also people who are visiting here in Metro Atlanta. This next insane fact about living in Atlanta has to do with the largest lake that we have here in Georgia. If you're thinking about moving to Georgia or any of the cities around Atlanta, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Thank you so much to everyone who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. But Lake Lanier is the largest lake in Georgia, and Lake Lanier is not a naturally occurring lake. It's a man-made lake that was created by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1956. They placed a dam on the Chattahoochee River, and pretty much everything on the other side of that dam was just flooded. It was just a river at first with cities and towns along the river, and the residents of those cities and towns were told to vacate the area. And essentially, all of those cities and towns were flooded by the dam and by the Chattahoochee River in an attempt to make Lake Lanier. So as you can imagine, there are still people today who would say that Lake Lanier is haunted. Not only were the cities and the towns flooded, but even like the cemeteries were flooded. It's so surprising that they just flooded all of these areas where people lived to create this lake. So this is really where Lake Lanier comes from. This next insane fact has to do with the popular drink Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was invented here in Atlanta, which is something many people know, but you might not know that Coca-Cola used to include cocaine as one of the ingredients for that drink. And in fact, from what I just read recently when trying to prepare for this video, the Coca-Cola company still has a contract with a company in New Jersey for creating cocaine. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but Obviously, Coca-Cola does not have cocaine in it anymore, but it used to in the late 1800s, I believe is about the time when they stopped putting cocaine in Coca-Cola. And then another insane fact is that one of the popular restaurants here in Atlanta called the Varsity, which is the largest drive-in restaurant, I believe, in the country, serves more Coca-Cola than anywhere in the world. So there is certainly a rich history with the Coca-Cola company here in Atlanta. This next insane fact about Atlanta has to do with the home prices here. In the last 5 years in Metro Atlanta, home prices have nearly doubled, which is a surprising fact for so many people. This has certainly made it more difficult for many people to buy a home in Atlanta, and as more and more people enter the housing market, home prices continue to increase every year. And then another insane fact when it comes to buying houses here in Metro Atlanta is that not every home here in Atlanta has access to high-speed internet. You would think in this day and age that every home would have access to high-speed internet, but that is not the case. Many of the homes in the Metro Atlanta area still have not dial-up, but it's like, 8 megabytes of download speed or 12 megabytes of download speed. And this is from like the cable internet that was put in the ground a decade or two ago. But as for high-speed fiber optic internet, not all of the homes have access to that. So if you're buying a home in Atlanta, you certainly want to check to see if that neighborhood or that home has access to high-speed internet. Another insane fact when it comes to living in Atlanta is that there are 6 million people who live in Metro Atlanta, but only 500,000 people live in the city of Atlanta. About 92% of the residents of Metro Atlanta live in one of the suburbs of Atlanta, not in the city. The suburbs are certainly far more popular. There are better schools in the suburbs. Home prices are more reasonable in the suburbs. There are plenty of things to do in the suburbs. So if you're thinking about moving to the Metro Atlanta area, it's really the suburbs where most people want to live. This next insane fact has to do with the Atlanta airport. Many people would say that the airport in Atlanta, which is Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, is the busiest airport in the world. And as someone who regularly uses that airport, I would probably agree. Another thing about that airport is that while it's the busiest airport, there's only one security checkpoint for the entire airport. So for all of the terminals, all of the flights, all of the people who are using that airport have to filter through the same security checkpoint. So when I catch a flight at the airport in Atlanta, I usually assume about 30 minutes to an hour just to get through the security checkpoint there at the airport. It's incredibly busy. There are thousands of people every hour going through that checkpoint, and it is absolutely a madhouse every time I go. So if you plan on using the airport here in Atlanta, you certainly want to remember that you'll need to plan plenty of time to get through the security checkpoint at the Atlanta airport. And then this last insane fact about Atlanta, Georgia is that in 1864, at the end of the Civil War, the entire city of Atlanta was burned to the ground. This is not something that every city in the United States could say, but as part of the conclusion of the Civil War, the entire city was burned down in an attempt to finally end the Civil War. Certainly a lot of crazy facts about the city of Atlanta. If you want to know more about what it's like to live here, check out this video. I'll see you there.